My friends, we will no longer cope this day, because Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, is not only real, but is releasing on September 30th, 2025 for the PS4, PS5, Switch and Switch 2, Xbox Series consoles, and Steam. It is being developed by Creative Studio 3 of Final Fantasy 14 and 16 fame, and the project is being led by original team members Yasumi Matsuno, Hiroshi Minigawa, and Kazutoyo My Hero. If you want to know more, watch on. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and we have a lot to talk about today. Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including my coverage of the, and I can't believe I'm saying this, upcoming remaster / sort of remake of Final Fantasy Tactics, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. This should go without saying, but I am absolutely going to be covering every single piece of information that comes out about this game leading up to its release, and absolutely making guides, informative content, let's plays, etc. after its release. So if you want someone to watch for Final Fantasy Tactics content, I promise you, I'm your guy. With that out of the way, let me just say, oh my god, I actually cried. I don't care if anyone thinks that's cringe. I don't care if anyone thinks that's dumb. Final Fantasy Tactics is my favorite game of all time, and I've been waiting with bated breath for this release and for this announcement ever since that GeForce Now leak years ago. And it's finally here, and I think my reaction speaks for itself.
O Father, abandon not your wayward children of Ivalice, but deliver us from our sins, that we might know salvation.
It's happening! Of course, you're not here for my reactions to all this type of stuff. You want to know what it is that we've learned, and I've broken down everything that I can find, including a lot of information that has been posted since the reveal trailer about what is happening with Ivalice Chronicles, what it entails, what it really means for Final Fantasy Tactics. We're going to go through all of that coming right now. Right off the bat, for you old heads like myself who know and love the original versions of the game, good news. Ivalice Chronicles includes not only the remastered, updated, whatever you want to refer to it as version of the game, but also the original version using the War of the Lions script. So if you just want to play the OG without any of the new stuff, other than like a couple quality of life features like an autosave, which we'll talk about in a minute, then you have that available to you. It'll be on your modern console of choice or PC. You can just vibe with that, and then if you want to dive into the remaster, it's there for you as well in the same release, which is a huge dub for this game. I love that. Right now, I've been seeing the price showing as $50 USD for the base game and $60 for the deluxe edition. There is also a collector's edition. We'll talk about what comes in those different editions near the tail end of the video. So what actually does Ivalice Chronicles entail? Well, right off the bat, you can see we've got enhanced graphics, kind of like Tactics Ogre Reborn, to make the game look more up to date, because let's be honest, the PS1 version and even the PSP version were definitely starting to show their age. Maybe not in terms of the pixel art of the character sprites and the animations, but the maps and other things were definitely starting to feel a little bit dated. So it's very nice to see that this change has happened. And of course, alongside those enhanced graphics, we have a massively redone UI, which is a decent chunk of what we're going to be talking about here. Right off the bat, we have one of my most requested features, a turn order with an indicator of what abilities are charging on the left side of the screen. It looks like this is probably an interface aspect that you'll be able to hide if you so choose. This is just something that needs to happen for pretty much any and all turn-based strategy games at this point, if you actually have like a turn order where you're not just going player phase, enemy phase, that type of thing. And having all abilities that are charging being displayed as well for easy reference is just a huge win. Like, yes, these things were able to be seen in the menus in the original release, but with bigger screens, bigger displays, there's no reason that we can't just have that for easy point of reference, especially since you can remove it from the screen at any time, it seems like. So huge dub with this. You can also see what units are going to be moving in what order just by glancing at their health bars. And yes, there are also health bars floating above characters on the map, which is another very nice, very quick and easy sort of reference material that isn't super intrusive, and I imagine you could probably turn these off as well if you don't like them. On the actual character information portraits, we can see zodiac signs, brave, faith, etc., all still visible, and we also may be able to select them as UI elements to get deeper insight into their effects, which would be phenomenal, since these are some of the more esoteric features of the game's mechanics that a lot of new players, even experienced players, don't really understand, so I love to see that. We're also able to see unit classes being displayed alongside things like their level using very FF14 style icons, which is just great for kind of learning what classes do what and what their sort of aspects are. Current JP is also listed alongside XP for easy reference when grinding, which is something I massively appreciate. Can't tell you the number of times that I've been in a skirmish trying to get a specific skill for a character, only to finish it thinking that in my head I had gotten all the JP that I needed, and found out I had a rounding error and I only have 297 instead of the 300 I need to get focused. It just drives you nuts. Annoying little thing. Nice to be able to see exactly what your total is now. There is apparently a tactical view as a new feature that has not yet been explained. Not entirely sure what this means for battles, but I imagine maybe it's going to be a sort of zoom out with smaller sprites and more comprehensive information. We've seen things like this in Tactics Ogre Reborn, so it could be a good way to just get an overall view of the battlefield without having to scroll around all over the place. We also see accuracy and predicted damage are still displayed as expected, but there's also this new 3-star icon that's been shown. In this battle, it also has 100% alongside accuracy, and my chat and I were kind of theorizing about what this could be. We're not sure if this is crit. I don't know why Ramza would have a 100% chance to crit here in this scenario, so I doubt it's that, but maybe it could also be something like Zodiac compatibility, which would be a pretty cool feature to have. But even then, having 100%, what would it then just be 50% and then a negative? I don't know. That doesn't seem quite right either. So if y'all have an idea of what this might be, drop it in the comments, because I'm completely clueless on this and I haven't seen anyone in my community have a good idea yet about it either. We can also see different sort of specific unit type indicators being displayed over health bars when they're relevant. For example, this spooky, scary skeleton boy who's being denoted as an undead enemy above his health bar. Again, for ease of reference, if you're going to be throwing an item at it, or even maybe need to have the idea to throw an item at it, which is cool. Love to see that, making use of the bigger screens and bigger displays that we have now. As a new feature, it looks like Ivalice Chronicles have gotten a bit of an overhaul, as we can see here a timeline featuring character presence, story events, story locations, etc., and how those things progress throughout the timeline as you learn more about it. This is a really nice way to just have an easy reference point for maybe new players who are having a hard time keeping up with the story, or people who want to reference other events that are going on outside the immediate view of our party. It's just nice to have something like this, and it helps you realize just how grand in scope FFT's story is, especially since it can be very easy to just kind of get blinders on and only focus on what's being presented directly to Ramza, when what's happening to Ramza is due to a much wider scope of events outside in the world that you don't get to directly see. So I love the inclusion of things like this. As another new feature, and I know I've kind of buried the lead on this one, but just like with Tactics Ogre Reborn, we have full voice acting for the entire script in both Japanese and English, with notable voices such as, Ben Starr as Dicedarg, which I'm sure is going to be a phenomenal performance.
Heavens fall upon your crown!
This vile charade has gone on long enough. It ends now.
We also, at one point in the trailer, hear Sid shouting the cast line for one of his Holy Sword abilities, which tells me that our pre-cast quotes are going to be back. That thing that was missing from the War of the Lions release that a lot of people really liked. And you know what? It's going to be way less obtrusive and time-consuming if a character just says the line while the ability is going off, adding some flavor and drama, rather than having it be a line that pops up that you then have to click through to then be able to see the ability go off. It's just a nice addition to the game, and I think it's going to have a lot of fun impact during critical dramatic moments during the story. We've also seen that there's a reference for the full job tree with unlock conditions as you discover them. Notably, though, it does not seem to include Dark Knight or Onion Knight from the War of the Lions version of the game, so that is potentially concerning. There may be another screen with special classes or something. I don't know, but I hope that we do wind up seeing those come back. Either way, though, it is nice again to have this as a reference. Hopefully you can click on some of these different characters and jobs to actually see what they do, what abilities they have, just again as a reference tool built into the game. We've also learned that adjustable battle speed has been added, which is just great for so many games, especially older ones that move fairly slowly. If you're doing JP grinding or trying to get XP leveled up in a specific class because you want specific growths, you're min-maxing like that, just being able to speed the game up and not use too much of your precious real-life time while trying to do that is phenomenal. Are there going to be times where I'm just grinding and I have the game on in the background, just sort of as atmosphere in a sort of zen-like gaming state and run on the normal speed? Absolutely. That is 100% going to be something that I do. But there's also going to be times where I just really want to get focus unlocked, man, and I don't feel like sitting there and watching everything play out at normal speed. So really cool to see. Love that that is a quality of life addition that has been made. Now, what's an interesting quality of life decision and potentially even just a fun game mode, challenge mode, difficulty levels are now a thing. Now, I imagine that this might be a little bit of a divisive topic, but we don't know much about these, how they're going to work, or anything else. I'm just hoping that the classic experience that we've known all these years will be the default difficulty, with then an easy mode for people who just like want to enjoy the story or whatever. But more importantly, hopefully a brutal hard mode for series vets like myself, or people who want to test their mettle, like really crank things up and see what big scary Zodiac enemies can do if you really take the training wheels off. You know, that should be awesome and potentially extremely painful. It's probably what we'll be playing on release if you don't have to beat the game first to unlock the highest difficulty. As mentioned, we also have autosave, which is, again, included even in the classic version of the game as a quality of life feature, which I just think is a good idea. Having a guaranteed autosave slot and then the ability to save in other spots, especially in areas where you could potentially soft lock yourself, Riavane, that's just great. No reason not to have it. Love to see it. We also see this screen here, which calls out, quote, extensive additions and adjustments to the story, which has not been elaborated on at all, but it does make me think we may see more side scenarios, cutscenes discussing character motivations, maybe some more guest characters. See Clive from FF16 show up anyway. Ben Starr is here. It wouldn't be that hard to have him do the Clive voice too, right? I don't know. It's the same dev team that was making FF16 who's making this, or at least under the same studio. Like, it seems feasible. But even if it's not, just to get more insight into some characters, maybe have some of the more important story scenes that just happen in, like, rumors and in Ivalice Chronicles and the like, actually get proper cutscenes for context to the story, would be really, really cool. I would like to see that type of thing, even if that's all that this means. Another interesting potential addition, I caught Mr. Matsuno tweeting about the game in both English and Japanese after the initial trailer came out. In English, he basically just apologized for taking so long for the game to come out and celebrated the return of Ramza. But in Japanese, he not only did that, but also referenced that this version of the game contains revised scenarios. Now, full transparency here, this was just Google Translate. This could just be what they were saying previously about like additions to the story or things like that. So if you all know Japanese, you know how to read it, and you want to correct me on this, that is totally fine. I absolutely understand that this might not be accurate, but it would be interesting if Mr. Matsuno was hiding a little bit of extra insight into some gameplay changes in the Japanese-only version of the tweet. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it. I know some people will be, but I imagine the fact that they've bundled the original version of the game in with this release means that they're a little bit more confident in making some changes to the revised version, as old heads who don't want to see those changes will still have a version of the game that they can play that has been currently provided to them on all platforms by Square. So maybe a little bit of credence to that? I don't know. We'll have to see, but I certainly hope so. One other thing that was pointed out as well, we may not be getting the PSP War of the Lions version cutscenes. We can see here Ramza and Delita's conversation about learning how to use grass whistles in the Mandalia Plains seems to have returned to an in-engine pixel sprite cutscene, whereas in War of the Lions, that was actually one of their animated cutscenes, and a very well-animated cutscene at that. So I don't know if this is an indicator that those cutscenes aren't being used, but new ones have been made. We saw a very nice cutscene at the beginning of the trailer that I think was part of the PSP release, maybe not entirely sure. If those versions are not here, I will be sad if they don't get replaced, although I can potentially see why. I imagine there's probably a lot of issues with compression and formatting because they were made for a very different system in a very different time. Fingers crossed that we get an equivalent then, if nothing else. Now, there are a lot of things that we have not yet seen that I and everyone else is very eager to find out more about, including but not limited to new jobs, what job unlock requirements there are, if any of those have changed, what, if any, new characters and side stories we could see, what the battle formation screen looks like, including on whether we're going to be setting up our formation actually on the battle map like in any other game that's come out recently. Army management screens haven't been shown, including equipment effects, skill costs, just skills, period, actually, now that I think about it, stat breakdowns, etc. We haven't seen monsters, if there's been any changes to them. No current mention of the War of the Lions special characters either, such as Luso and Balthier. which alongside at current the lack of the Dark Knight or Onion Knight makes me a little concerned that those won't be included, because I do really like them. Almost makes me wonder if like none of the additional stuff from War of the Lions would be included. I can't see why they would do that, but maybe, I don't know. It would be a shame to lose some of the quests about Beowulf's backstory and things, but we'll have to see on that. The script has been apparently reworked again. Haven't really seen too much in terms of how different it is from the War of the Lions translation versus the OG translation, so I'll have to keep an eye on that. And there's been no mention or view of the multiplayer content, which is something that I know is pretty low priority for a lot of people, but I desperately want to see it. My buddy Eric and I have been playing the multiplayer of War of the Lions on and off for years whenever we're able to meet up, but one or both of us actually has functioning PSPs at the time to do it with, and I would love to have it in this edition of the game so we could really dig into it each other. We didn't do the versus modes as much, but some of the special scenarios that they came up with for cooperative play were super cool, and I would even love to see more of that added in, because I do think it adds a lot of life to the game, and it makes it very enjoyable to play with a friend. We do, of course, have a bunch of additional miscellaneous info that doesn't really fit in anywhere else, so I'll slot it in at the end of the video here. We did have the pre-order bonuses and collector's box announcements. We're going to go over what those include now. The pre-order gets you white gear for Ramza, presumably a reskin. Not sure if this is only going to be for specific acts when he gets different armor sets. How you're going to equip them, I don't know, but pretty cool. You'll have a couple different reskins for Ramza potentially. And you'll also get some basic gear and items. Really nothing to write home about, just a couple of boosts to get you through the early game a little bit faster, but even then, really not at all consequential, but it's there if you want. The deluxe edition, however, gets you the Academy set, and this is a little bit more interesting. The blade boosts speed slightly. The beret prevents charm, decent. The tunic grants shell. All right, we do like our magic resist. And the ring grants increased JP gains. Oh boy. I mean, that alone makes the deluxe edition worth it in a lot of ways, because as we know, the JP gain system is one of the more limiting factors of Final Fantasy Tactics. I still enjoy it. Again, going through and grinding for JP is just kind of a zen thing for me to do in this game, because it gives me an excuse to play the game more. But the fact that there is just a boost to getting JP through an item makes me kind of concerned that they haven't done anything to rework the JP system, and as much as I enjoy it for what it is, it probably needs to be reworked. You know, I've talked before on the channel about how JP boost should just be incorporated into every class, and or the amount of JP you get from JP boost should just be what you get when you gain JP from an attack. So going to be interesting to keep an eye on that one, see what reworks, if any, have been made to that system, and what sort of implications this ring has on all of that. So tell me your thoughts on that one. You also get the black and red gear sets for Ramza through the deluxe edition as well. So it kind of seems like representing the three major factions, the Northern Sky, the Southern Sky, and the Church Knights. Pretty cool to see. Hopefully they look good. And then there's the collector's edition. This is really nice. It's actually at a pretty decent price. I mean, you know, $200 is $200 US, but it does come with a pretty decent amount of stuff. You get an art box, an Academy era statue of Ramza, which from what we've seen looks pretty dang nice. 3 Chocobo plushies, one of each color, which is cool. An art sheet set. A set of Zodiac Stone magnets, which is actually one of the things I'm most excited about. I have a whole bunch of magnets of all the different jobs up on the fridge, and I would love to be able to put the stones next to them or around them or something, as well as a pop-up map of the church from the start of the game, which is really, really nice. This is definitely something that I'll be interested in picking up. I believe you get a copy of the game with it. The messaging was a little weird. It said that you could get the collector's edition with the game, but the game wouldn't be packaged with it. It would just be delivered with it, so not entirely sure what that entails. Gonna have to get a little bit more info on that one. And finally, before we give our closing thoughts here, I want to wrap up with this message about the reveal from Yasumi Matsuno himself. If you don't know who Matsuno is, he's the creator of Final Fantasy Tactics, as well as the Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre games. And I feel like this quote gives great insight into not only Matsuno's mindset and why he makes the games that he does, but it highlights to me why the stories of these games have resonated with me so strongly to this day, and really are very important for everyone to see going forward into the future. So I'm just going to read this verbatim. You can follow along. Nearly 30 years ago, the collapse of Japan's bubble economy engulfed the nation's financial institutions in mountains of bad debt, triggering a wave of corporate bankruptcies, a sudden and extreme rise in unemployment rates, and a stagnation of Japanese society as a whole. It was an era when many were robbed of hope, when dreams were measured by their price tag. Against this historical backdrop, I crafted a story. It was the story of Ramza, a young man who fought tirelessly against the entrenched social class system. It was the story of Delita, who sought to take advantage of this confusion and despair to advance his own social position. It was a story of a peculiar destiny in which friendship and betrayal intertwine. And now, in 2025, a time when inequality and division are still deeply rooted in our society, I offer this story once again. The will to resist is in your hands. Yasumi Matsuno, original script, scenario writer, and editor. And I mean, yeah, that just tells you everything that it needs to tell you that you need to know, right? Like, Matsuno writes games that are inspired by real-world events and humanity as a whole. They are some of the most human stories. And I think that's why they sit with people so well. Yes, they're phenomenal games in their own right, with great art, excellent music, deep, intricate, mechanically interesting combat mechanics and leveling systems and class building systems. But the core of these games and everything that goes into designing them is these stories of the human condition, of the struggles that we go through and how we continue to push on through them and the choices that we make in doing so. And for anyone who has not yet played Final Fantasy Tactics, keep that in mind as you go into it for the first time. Because I think you'll see a lot of Matsuno's own personal philosophies and a lot of why I love these games as well, if you do. With that said, obviously, I am incredibly excited. This is a release that, as I said at the beginning of the video, I've been waiting for many years, and in a lot of ways, this release of Final Fantasy Tactics in its newest form is what I've been building this channel towards since I started it back in 2019. I've always wanted to cover Final Fantasy Tactics on the channel, but I've always held off because I knew this was coming over the horizon, and now is finally my opportunity to share my favorite game of all time with all of you in its entirety. It may not be the most successful thing I do on the channel. There's no way for me to predict how the YouTube algorithm is going to go, and there are a lot more people with eyes on this game than any other tactics or strategy title that I've covered in the past. But regardless, this is the most emotionally invested I've ever been in something on the channel, and I hope that comes through in the content that I make, and I hope you guys choose to come along with me for the ride. For now, I'm going to wrap this one up here. Keep your eyes here for any and all new information related to Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, as I will be jumping on that immediately, everywhere, all the time, forever, until the game comes out, and you know we'll be covering everything about it after we get our hands on it for real. Until then, though, thank you all so much for watching. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everyone. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.